You can all join palms and repeat after me. I take refuge in the Buddha.
I take refuge in the Buddha.
I take refuge in the Dharma.
I take refuge in the Dharma.
I take refuge in the Sangha.
I take refuge in the Sangha.
Keeping the palms joined. Put the palms down. So, good morning, everybody. Welcome to Intro to Buddhism and Meditation, live from the Dharma Bum Temple. It's good to be here, sitting with you all. Why don't we take a few minutes as people are settling in, and if you're new to joining us on YouTube, on the screen, somewhere on the bottom right or right side, there's a little chat box. And it's a nice way for us to just kind of share and connect with others as we're joining. Why don't you just type a couple words about something that brings you joy right now, something you're happy about. We spent so much time every day, probably, especially in the last week and the last couple months, focused on a lot of pain, a lot of suffering, a lot of challenges, a lot of difficulties, a lot of really horrific, disgusting things that are going on. And I think it's important that we also take a few moments to acknowledge some joy and some happiness in our lives. Otherwise, you're going to find yourself in a pretty miserable state all day long. So we'll take the next just kind of few minutes. Just like I said, feel free to type in something right now in your life that brings you some joy or some happiness, something that makes you feel good. So Travis will read it. We'll share it. You can probably all see what people write, but just a nice way for people to connect. So we'll take a couple minutes and do that.
So Kathleen said music.
Music, yeah.
Katie said being in the company of friends.
Don't forget. Okay.
Marisa said the pretty yellow bird that's been hanging around outside their window.
Nice.
Susan said their dogs bring them great joy. They're together on the sofa. Stacy said this cool, beautiful day, and her sweet kitty, Isabella. Janelle said the fresh scent of eucalyptus in the air on my run this morning. Penny's also grateful for having dogs to snuggle with. Tom's grateful for riding his bike.
And I'm grateful for you, Tom.
Bobby's grateful for doves nesting in a plant outside their window. Bridget's happy for this time as it's been one of growth for them. Happy playing the ukulele. And the opportunity to turn inward to face their white privilege.
Sure.
Anne's grateful for the beautiful murals going up in downtown.
Great. Yeah, a lot of good things. And like I said, I get in this dialogue a lot with people that it's really difficult right now to try to find some positive and happy things. And for me, what I've learned from this practice is that you can stand up for what you believe is right and speak your mind, not stay quiet, see all the things that are going on in the world around us, and do our best to make change. And while we feel destroyed and disgusted and hurt, the practice is to, as we work to make change, to come from a place of love and compassion and understanding always, which is extremely difficult to do. And if we don't stop each day for a few moments and recognize the things that we're grateful for, then all of our actions are going to be driven only by anger and hatred and rage. And those actions don't usually work out so well. So again, a tough time, but please take each day and take a few moments, just find gratitude. And if it's something you don't do, maybe add it first thing in the morning. When you wake up, maybe sit for a couple minutes, close your eyes, take some deep breaths, and find some gratitude. And before you go to sleep at night, close your eyes, take a few deep breaths, and find some gratitude. And then every other moment throughout your day, work diligently at making the change that we all want to see. So with that, we'll start with meditation practice. A couple things to tell you before we begin, especially for those who may be new. Nothing's going to happen to you, right? You're not going to float away. You won't have any mystical, magical experiences. You won't figure anything out, right? Especially if you're new, often we think that meditation is about having some grand discoveries, okay? You're just going to sit, you're going to breathe. You'll hear sounds inside the room, wherever you are, outside. This is life. Life is filled with chaos, as we know. And this practice is learning to get quiet and still on the inside within all of the chaos. Your mind won't shut off, it won't stop racing, and don't judge yourself. We're just going to sit, we're going to breathe. Posture, you want to be comfortable. If you're on a cushion, you want to slide to the front third. Pushing the stomach forward. Allows the back to straighten, shoulders are relaxed, hands can be on the knees or in the lap, whatever's comfortable. If you're on a bench or a chair, also trying to sit up straight, relaxing the shoulders. Try not to lay down unless physically you need to. You have a tendency to fall asleep, so try to learn to relax while being upright if possible. I'll guide us as we begin. We'll settle into a little bit of silence, and most important, don't expect anything. We're just going to sit and breathe. And starting with the eyes closed, if comfortable, or slightly open. Mouth open or closed. We'll start with taking 3 deep breaths, slowly. And eventually settle into a natural rhythm of the breath. Noticing the mind as it wanders, jumping from thought to thought. Start with gently guiding the attention, focus to the stomach or chest. Breathing in, feel them rise. Breathing out, they fall. Simply going to continue this practice, observing sensation of breath, expecting nothing but to sit and breathe. And as the mind wanders, lost in thought, recognize it. Release that thought. Return attention, focus to the breath. Where's your mind? Lost in thought? Release that thought. Return attention, focus to the breath. Keeping the mind alert, aware of each sound, each thought, each physical sensation, yet concerned with nothing but sitting, breathing. letting go of expectations, letting go of judgment from the practice, just sitting, breathing. And with the body still, rested, and the speech quiet, aware of all sounds, and the mind learning to settle, know what it's like to just sit and breathe. Knowing with each breath, there's nothing else to do, nowhere else to go, and no one else to be. Everything exactly as it is. Sitting, breathing. And once again, taking 3 deep breaths, slowly. And as you slowly open the eyes, slowly begin to move. And most important, with the practice of meditation is to recognize how you feel now, immediately after. Compare this to how you typically feel throughout your day. Recognize the difference, if there is one. Ask yourselves how you prefer to feel every day for the rest of your life. And realize however you feel now, if it's quiet, calm, and still, or busy mind, racing mind, whatever you're sitting with at this moment, has nothing to do with anything I said. It's nothing to do with how we sit and hold the hands across the legs. It's nothing to do with the sounds around us or anything else for that matter. It's everything to do with your own mind and your own mind's reaction to an external condition. This is what the Buddha called pratitya samuppada, means dependent origination. This is the basis for the Buddha's awakening. The word Buddha simply means awakened. He was a human being no different than any one of us who began to understand why he suffered, why he got angry, sad, depressed, stressed, anxious. He began to understand the causal relationship of all phenomena. And what that means for all of us is every moment of our lives, things happen when we react. More stuff happens, more reactions. That's what we get. The practice of meditation is learning what it's like to respond to something quietly, peacefully, still. But it is still responding. Too often people have brought up, especially recently, this idea that being Buddhist means you don't respond, or that being Buddhist means you don't react, or that being Buddhist means you just sit there and watch the world as it happens. That's not it at all. I think the Buddha himself was an activist. He lived every day and he preached every day for 45 years. How to live a kind, compassionate, generous, loving life. That's what he taught. Too many people see images of the Buddha on a poster with him sitting under a tree and think that being Buddhist means you just sit there your whole life. It's not the case. He spent 45 years walking, teaching, and sitting and meditating. But he didn't just sit. He was very active. He saw pain, he saw suffering in humans, and he did what he could to help alleviate it. He taught a path to end suffering. Now, it was very different at that time because at that time, the people all believed, for the most part, in the cycle of rebirth. And so what he taught was, if you want to free yourself from suffering, you must free yourself from the cycle of birth and death and enter into what's called nirvana, freedom from suffering. Most people today don't look at Buddhist practice that way. They use Buddhist practice as a tool and a philosophical way of life to find a sense of peace and joy. And that's great. I think it has to start there anyways. If you work through the Eightfold Path and you work towards the ending of suffering and you work towards nirvana, I don't think you're going to get there if you're angry and pissed off all day long. So it starts with finding a sense of purpose, a sense of peace, a sense of joy in your life in what you do. It doesn't start with just sitting and doing nothing. It doesn't start with shutting up. It starts with expressing what's in your heart and what's in your mind, but coming from a place of wisdom and compassion. This is the practice. It's coming from a place of looking at what is ultimate truth. What is the true nature of reality? What is actually happening? And how are we perceiving it? And understanding that no matter how we perceive something, that what we are perceiving is very different from how we perceive it. And can we be humble enough to recognize that we may view something And maybe our understanding of it isn't absolutely correct. It doesn't mean it's wrong. But can we be humble enough to look at a situation and begin to understand it? Understand the greed, understand the anger, understand the ignorance that is driving every situation. If you're brand new to Buddhism, that is what the Buddha taught as the second noble truth. The first one is suffering, the second one is the cause. The cause is greed, anger, ignorance. So when we see suffering in the world, the practice is to recognize where's the greed, where's the anger, and where's the ignorance. But it doesn't do any good to jump to other people's greed, anger, and ignorance if you first don't recognize your own. The third noble truth, as I already talked about, is the ending of suffering, which is nirvana. And the fourth one is the path. To have the correct views and thoughts and speech and action, livelihood, effort, mindfulness, concentration. This is your karma. This is your action. This is what you do every day. Which is why it's so important to understand that the Buddhist practice is not just sitting and doing nothing. It is incredibly engaged in community, in society, in the world. But how do you engage? And can you engage without coming from a place of hatred? This is the practice. Not an easy one. I want to take maybe 5 minutes. I don't know how long this will take to read, but I want to read it just so I can share it here with those, because the question keeps coming up. So I want to share it with those who are here today. I also want to share it just so we have a copy of it recorded and we can just put this as our response as to when is the temple opening. And we'll put it up on the website and everybody can just read it, and that way people will know. This was in the newsletter that went out yesterday. I'm just going to take a couple minutes and read what I wrote, and then we'll go back to just questions about meditation and Buddhist practice. But again, I want to use this time to address this. So again, the question of when are we reopening? So the newsletter that went out yesterday, the title was Plans for Reopening. So I'd like to share with you what I wrote, which are our plans for reopening. Hello all, that's you. The temple received an email 2 weeks ago from the mayor's office with regards to their exploration of reopening places of worship. They were reaching out to many religious facilities in San Diego and putting together a plan to open at some time in the future. I was quite honored and humbled that we were on the list of places to contact. That says a lot about the community we have built the past 14 years. I spoke with a woman who was tasked with putting a plan together to potentially reopen places of worship. She asked me what we had to say with regards to opening the temple. I said that we had no intention of opening soon, as we did not feel it was safe as of yet. She was surprised, but also seemed pleased that we were being cautious with the members of our community. The Bodhisattva means enlightened being. The Bodhisattva practice of the 6 paramitas, 6 perfections, this is the practice of a Bodhisattva. The Bodhisattva practice of the 6 paramitas have always guided the Dharma Bum Temple. So I will use them below to share the current practice in place for opening the DBT. The first is generosity. Be generous by giving the DBT community safety. Give people the opportunity to be exposed less to anything that may cause harm. Give people the opportunity to be exposed less to anything that may cause people harm. I didn't write it twice, I'm just reading it twice. As people roam out more, they are more at risk. Allow time to pass, so when the temple doors open, we can give people a community that is as free as possible from causing harm. The second paramita is morality. Morality. Be honest with the community about the truth that no one ultimately knows if it's safe to go anywhere or not. Do not create any gathering that could potentially cause harm. The third paramita is patience. Patience. There is no rush for anything. Practice patience at all times. This is an opportunity to be patient with the community. while we practice in various ways at home or wherever you are. Your patience can literally save lives. Diligence. Use this time to work hard at cultivating wisdom and compassion from home or wherever you are currently. This is an excellent opportunity to understand that Buddhist practice is not about being at a temple, but training the mind. Train your mind to be at ease and open your heart to love all beings. Concentration. Learning to focus on the present moment while being aware of what is happening around you at all times. Focus on the ultimate truth, which is your breath is what keeps you alive. Use this time to abide in sensation of breath and appreciate the breath for all it brings. Wisdom, the sixth paramita. Practice the paramitas listed above. This is a time to appreciate every passing moment and not crave or desire anything more than what you have at this moment. We will gather again at some time in the future, and when we do, it will be beautiful. Signed, me, co-founder, Dharma Bum Temple. So that is the temple's response to when we are opening. So thanks for listening. And now I'll just open up to questions on meditation, Buddhist practice. As normal, after we do meditation and I say a few words, I'd like to just now turn it over to you. If you're new to joining us on YouTube, there's a chat box on the right side somewhere. You can type a question in. Travis will read it, and then I'll respond. So we'll take some time now to open up to questions.
So someone asked, how do you feel is a good way to meditate on non-discrimination between groups?
How do I feel is a good way to meditate on non-discrimination between groups? This may be a little challenging, but so if you were here live and in person, which I'll say now is, can you, because that question, when I hear it, I hear many different things in that, so I need further clarification on what you mean specifically about meditating on non-discrimination between groups. So if you could maybe elaborate briefly on that. And maybe you're just looking for how to meditate on to not discriminate, period. But I'm not exactly sure what you're looking for here. So I'll give you a minute. If not, I'll just ramble off what's on my head. Which is normally what I do anyways. But with a question like this, I just want to try to make sure I address it as clearly as possible. could start by saying I wouldn't discriminate anything, period. Any answer? No, okay. There's in Buddhist teachings, when you look at Mahayana Buddhism, you look at the Diamond Sutra, the Heart Sutra, it talks about duality and to practice and abide in non-duality, where it's not this versus that, or right versus wrong, or good versus bad, but just to recognize karma being action as things that are happening. And to recognize that we're all human, based, and our current situation is based on where we grew up, how we grew up, who our parents were, who our friends were, what race we are, what gender identity we are, what sexual orientation we are. All of these things condition our behaviors and our experiences. And they're all very different. And so on one hand, you know, in this kind of spiritual way, this saying of we're all one and we're all the same, we're not. We're all very different. We all have very different experiences, and we think differently, we look differently, we act differently. We're not the same. We all have a breath, we all have our hearts. And so that is what kind of bonds us together as humans. But after that, we're all individuals. So for me as an unenlightened practitioner, I'm very aware of the biases that are in my mind. I'm very aware of how I discriminate or how I have dualistic thinking. I'm very aware of how I was raised and brought up as a privileged white male and what that means. I'm very aware of the benefits that I've been afforded based on this systemic, you know, society and issues that we have going on. I'm very aware of those. And even when I think back to when I was a teenager or even older, and I would recognize my biases towards races or genders, I didn't think about it then, but as I've gotten older and really the last 5 years started to realize, like, wow, Jeff, you really are privileged. You really do have these views because you're male, because you're white, because you're straight. That shapes my reality. And I have just about every privilege in the book. Now the question is, around duality or discrimination, the question is, how do I then treat that view? How can I look at the dualistic mind, the discriminating mind that I have, and take Buddhist teachings of loving kindness and compassion and use what I have in a way to benefit others? That to me is the practice. I think there's often this, and this question comes up a lot, there's often this misguided view that to be Buddhist means you're not going to judge something, right? Well, I'm Buddhist, I don't judge things anymore. I mean, that's the most ridiculous thing in the world, right? That's, you're lying to yourself. You know, you read a Pema Chodron book and she talks about, you know, non-duality or non-judgment. You're like, well, I'm Buddhist now, I don't judge things. Well, that in itself is a judgment. That's a judgment that says I am Buddhist, and because I'm Buddhist, I'm going to choose to not judge things. So does that mean if you're not Buddhist, you do judge everyone? Right? So I think you have to also be honest with yourself that says, yes, maybe you meditate, yes, maybe you read Buddhist stuff, yes, maybe you call yourself Buddhist or identify as Buddhist, however you want to label it, but recognize you do discriminate, you do have a dualistic mind, and you do judge everything all day long. And if you don't realize those three things, I think you need to spend some more time looking in the mirror. I'm not saying you don't, to whoever asked the question, but this is really to everybody. If you don't think those things are going on, then you should spend some more time staring in the mirror and being honest with yourself. And being able to call yourself out on your own judgments towards others is a beautiful practice, because I think that's the only way one can evolve, right? For me to get to a place in my life where I could recognize racial biases that I had was really huge. And to not shy away from them, and to not be afraid of them, and to not think that because I have racial biases, that means I'm a terrible person. But to recognize I have racial biases because of how and where I grew up. I don't feel guilty for that. I don't blame myself for that. I don't punish myself for that. I'm aware of it. And I realize, how can I use this now to make a change? First to myself and then to those around me. So those are some very brief thoughts on that topic with what's sitting with me right now.
They did follow up with,
I figured. Go ahead, sorry.
about a minute after you
I
said
figured, yeah.
It's easy to become angry with words and decisions of other people, which can make us see them as others, a different group from ourselves.
Yeah, I mean, I get it. It's we look at others who are making decisions and actions and we want to hate them. I fully understand that. And the only, other than what I just shared, which I think can apply to that follow-up question as well, is that if we hate the people that we think are coming from a place of hatred, that doesn't solve anything. We view people who are coming from a place of hate, and they are acting on that place of hate, and they are causing harm. And this is extremely unskillful and extremely painful. Us coming from a place of love and compassion doesn't mean that we like what they are doing or that we think what they're doing is okay. But if we hate them, nothing's going to change. Then you just have two people. I talk about this all the time. I've been talking about this for years, before the present nightmare that we're living in. If we hate the people that cause harm, we just have, as I started to say, two people, two cities, two states, two countries that hate each other. And I don't see anything good coming out of people that hate each other. The real challenge is, can you love the people that are coming from a place of hate, that we perceive as a place of hate, and begin to understand why they are being that way? And can we work with them to help them understand? And to those who've been oppressed, can we be quiet and listen to understand? And stop telling people that we know or we understand. All I can say is that I know what it's like to be me. That's it. And even that view is an illusion. Even my view of what I think it's like to be me is a complete illusion, delusion. I'm not even right on that. That's just my perception of what it's like to be me. That's not what it's like to be me. So we can't pretend to know what it's like to be anybody else. So hopefully that's helpful.
So Dharma Bum Life Tom asked, can you give a teaching on the 5 skandhas?
The 5 skandhas. So the 5 skandhas are form, sensation, perception, volition, and consciousness. And I'd say the example or metaphor, and I'll probably just use it now, that I use because I heard it years ago and it made sense to me. It's very simple, I think. I like simple, but then you can use this to apply it to anything else. You have a hand. Let's say you have a hand, right? There's your form. You have a stove. You have a stove that's hot, right? Maybe the flames are there. Maybe it's just hot and no flames, right? You put your hand on the stove. There's a sensation, right? The sensation is what you feel. It's very quick. This all happens very quickly. It would have happened 1,000 times in the moment I've already started responding to what you just asked. But there's a sensation that occurs when my hand touches the heat, right? There's a perception that occurs that says something to the effect of hot. I don't like this. So you have form, you have sensation, the hand burning, you have the perception, this is hot. You have the volition, you have the action which will pull your hand away. And then you have consciousness, which is the awareness of all of that. Now, the 5 skandhas are occurring simultaneously, endlessly, every moment of your entire life, in everything that you do. Form, sensation, perception, volition, consciousness. What is the physical form that you're dealing with? What are the sensations that you're feeling every moment of your life? What is your then perception of that sensation? What is then your action based on that perception? And then how are you consciously aware? How does that resonate in your consciousness? And how do you then continue to go through your days knowing that that's happening every moment? So whatever you're challenged with, struggling with, my guess is your question was not around how to make sure you don't burn your hand on the stove. But knowing Tom, it could have been, you never know. And apply that almost like an equation, really. I was thinking of a mathematical equation, but just apply that as steps that occur. There's the form of you sitting there right now. There's a sensation of how you're feeling right now as you observe and as you listen. There's the perception that you have as I'm speaking. There's the action you're taking from this interaction. And then there's how does that settle into your consciousness and what does that do for you in this moment and moving forward. If I know that putting my hand on a hot stove is going to hurt, I will stop putting my hand on a hot stove. Think of a child who's told, hold my hand before crossing the street, look both ways before you cross the street. These things get conditioned in our head over and over and over again. And that becomes the patterns and conditioned behaviors that we live with. And I think the path to awakening is seeing deeply into the skandhas and recognizing our ignorance of the perception as they're occurring. Good luck with that. Last thing on that, I think that last part, form, sensation, those things are occurring. Perception, the third one, your perception of that. When I say I think awakening has to do with your ignorance of that perception. Meaning that am I viewing that perception with ultimate wisdom? And in the case of a hot stove, probably. But there are moments where you'll put your hand on something and get burned, and you keep doing it over and over and over again. And that's the unenlightened mind that is stuck in samsara, stuck in suffering. So stop putting your hand on the stove. Other questions? Oh, we're about out. Anyone more sitting there?
Yes. So Beth asked, do you have tips for helping children and teens during this time with managing anxiety?
The thing with children and teens, the first thing I'll say, and just as, a default, we have a family group. Family Sangha meets the second and fourth Saturday of the month. I don't know if you're aware of that. 9 a.m. on Zoom. Jessica and Josh and Lisa, they lead that. It's for the parents. They address exactly what you're asking about. Teenage group, it's led by our college group, Delta Beta Tau, every Sunday at noon, also on Zoom. And it's a place for the teens together collectively as teens without parents to address exactly what you're talking about. As far as my response to what are tips to help children and teens address the anxiety is address your own anxiety first, and then share that with the children. Children and teens don't listen too much very often. They listen to peers at times, but I think if you address your own anxiety and you help the kids understand that, almost like the question I started with today, what are you grateful for? I would help them find and explore what in their lives they have a tremendous amount of gratitude for. Anxiety during this time is going to be there. Understand the impermanence of it and that it will fade away. So help them find gratitude in what they have, because they're probably pretty fortunate right now. So I'm going to close on that. We'll join palms. And the benefit of this practice be shared with all beings in all directions. May all be at peace. May all be free from suffering. May any merit gained from this practice be transferred to those who need it most. So a few announcements before you all head off. Thanks for being here. My name is Jeff. We started the Dharma Bum Temple 14 years ago to introduce Buddhist practice, meditation to local folks. Those of us who lead, we're not monks, we're not nuns, we're not gurus, we're not masters, we're not teachers, we're not looking for students, we're just practitioners. We do our best to take our understanding of Buddhist teachings and put it into terms that hopefully make sense to those of you who join us. We have almost our entire schedule online now. Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday nights, I do the Intro to Buddhism Tuesday. Alex does a Loving Kindness Metta on Wednesday. Travis does Dharma Bum Basics Thursday nights at 7. Those are all on YouTube. Everything else is on Zoom. Our family song, as I mentioned, all of our recovery classes, Sunday morning, Saturday morning, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday nights. Our whole recovery song is happening. Our teenage group, our kids group. So everything's going on there. Monday through Friday, we sit every morning. Bob's back with his class on Sunday afternoon. So just go to the website, you look on the schedule there, and it'll have, when you click it and open up the event, you'll see it there. A couple announcements. Tom Jeff, Thomas Arbiko, the abbot of Metaphors Monastery, he will be joining us via Zoom. It was in the newsletter, although I didn't post the details yet. I think it's the 26th, I believe. It's coming up here, though. The info will get sent out, but I think it's June 26th at 7 p.m. It'll be on Zoom, and again, the Facebook group, Dharma Bum Temple Sangha, or the website or newsletter will have the announcements for that. Other than that, please continue to be safe. Please stay home. Please just be smart. As the world opens up again and people tend to think it's safe, it could be the most dangerous time. So let's do our best to protect those in our community, not only just Dharma Bum Temple community, but the community around us. And let's try to be safe and as healthy as possible. June 26th?
25th.
25th. So June 25th, Tom Jeff will be joining us at 7 o'clock. And again, the details will be sent out and posted soon. So enjoy your day. Thanks for being here. If I never see you again, think good thoughts, speak good words, do good deeds. That's the heart of this practice.